the budget as a document, I try to approach within the context of an economic strategy for the city of Chicago, which is why within the first year when I became mayor, I asked both the Brookings Institute and McKinsey to do an economic study for the city of Chicago. What are our strengths? What are our kind of weaknesses? What do we got to do to move the city forward? We had just come out of a decade in which we lost 200,000 people in population, businesses were leaving, and the city's economic finances as municipal side were upside down. And so I wanted an economic strategy. We have our strengths in the sense of 36%, 35% of the people in the city of Chicago have a 4-year college degree. In the United States, it's 27%. How do you keep making a place where people with higher education want to come? And it's one of my impetuses to make sure that our community colleges are providing both the students and the city the economic capacity that helps. Second is not just the busiest, but we have the most connected #1 airport and aviation system in the city, and being able to get anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, directly multiplied times a day is a real strategic advantage, as is the convenience of our public transportation system, which is why we've expanded it with bike lanes and the different things we're doing on buses and trains, etc. And an example of that is this, by January or December, will be the first public transportation system with 4G, because it continues to make sure that employees and employers are efficient in their time, and we have a modern system. Third, we have a good public-private partnership, but our finances had to be changed to remove, given all those strengths and the certainty we have, the one place that there was uncertainty was among our finances. And companies today make decisions based on certainty. They want to know what the world's going to be like, not just tomorrow, but for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And we had to go about doubling down on our strengths, addressing our weaknesses or vulnerabilities, and one of our major vulnerabilities was our finances. And I put finances into 2 houses, the annual budget, and then the pensions. I also happen to believe there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Some have argued, when I first got here, just raise taxes. Some have argued, just take a chainsaw through the budget. And both of those were the wrong approach. We were just coming out of the recession. The economy was wobbly. Not everybody was coming out of the recession at the same pace, and some were actually stuck in the recession. And so I rejected the absolutes on either end. We have systematically gone through the budget, made reforms that people have been advocating for years that the political system held back. With this, taking over $600 million out of the system, while doubling down on things like our kids' early childhood and after school, like our neighborhood services, and as well as our investment in small businesses and their capacity. And then making kind of fundamental reforms as well. And that's why I didn't want to go to property taxes in the past, because I wanted to make sure that we were making the tough decisions we needed to make and give people an out. And I didn't want to give them an out as it related to taking on some politically walled off or sacred areas or changes to how we deliver services. All that said, we've also, I think because we've cut the structural deficit by 2/3, you can actually talk about eliminating it. And we stayed consistent with a reform partnered with revenue. Second, and those were inherited things. Second, as it related to pensions, I ran in 2011 saying we're going to confront them. I laid out a proposal down in Springfield, negotiated 5, actually 6, 5 of them of which we passed, 1 the sergeants voted down. So I've been in 4 years very consistent about dealing with pensions. And here, at least we got labor and municipal, it's going to go through the courts. On the police and fire, we have an agreement. This was inherited. In 2010 the state changed the law. And we now said, here's the choices we have. I rejected, I think it's wrong, all the cuts in police, fire, and neighborhood services you would have to make that payment. And I've laid out a progressive way of funding them so we meet our obligation. But then in the end of the day, and I'll wrap up, is that the finances of the city removes an uncertainty about the city, and then it's consistent across the board. We're willing to challenge look our challenges straight in the eye muster the political strength to deal with them. That gives people confidence about the certainty of what the city would look like and the certainty of the public sector not to run away from its challenges but to deal with them. And we will continue to invest in the things that make us strong while also economically investing to make sure that everybody has a chance to participate in a city that's economically vibrant. And that's the approach and philosophy. And I think while we have a lot of work ahead of us, there's results in to show the progress being made from where we were in 2011.
You know, you always hear that from business people. You ask them, what's the biggest problem? And I always think they're going to say high taxes, and they say high taxes. The first thing they always say is predictability, stability. And Jim and I were talking to the Japanese Consul General, I think, last week, and we asked them.
You guys got a lot of time on your hands, man.
And we asked that guy just that question, you know, what's it take for the Japanese to move into Illinois? And he said stability and certainty. They want to know what's going to be. So let me ask you the first question, which is this property taxes, 363 million the first year, and then you're going to have a property tax increase of 109 million the next year, 53 million the next year. How do we know that that means the city council is going to take not one vote this year, but 4 votes, right? They're going to have to be...
Well, I don't think it matters whether it's 4 votes or 1 vote, but what we're proposing is to actually deal with police and fire pensions all the way through the next 4 years. So we need 318 million for 2015, another 109 in 2016, and then 53 and 63. The idea behind doing the 4-year look for 4 years is to provide that stability and know that that money's there and know that we're able to meet the obligation that we've got and that we don't have to go each year through each budget trying to find a way to pay for it.
Yeah. How does that work? You can't lock in a property tax increase in the second, third, and fourth year now, can you?
Yeah.
How does that work?
We do it for bonds right now. Bond ordinances get voted on once and provide a schedule that's over a 30-year time period. As long as the number's known, then we can actually vote for that levy now.
Let me also say one, then go back to a bigger point. Not a bigger point, but that's the kind of, Alex is right. You can have the vote now. In the ability to grow jobs, convince companies to either expand or locate or move operations, people are making a decision not for 1 year, but for a longer horizon. Whether they open a plant, a facility, move an office, set up a new division operation. And that's why, if you go back to what I originally said, you have to provide, I don't want to say like a menu, but as much in the world of a lot of uncertainties, where you can give people certainty. And I want to go back to employees. It is a real advantage that we have 36% of our people with a 4-year college degree, when 27% is the rest of the nation. But we also have 15 universities here in the city, and colleges. We have Illinois to draw on. We're the #1 city for the Big 10 states where kids come graduating. That is a huge pool. And then to tell an employee or employer, yes, you have Booth, and yes, you have Kellogg, and you have University of Michigan, and you have Notre Dame, and you have IIT and U of I, or UIC, but you also have Harold Washington, Malcolm X, and Olive Harvey, and Kennedy King. That gives them absolute certainty beyond the C-suite. And that is a huge advantage for the city of Chicago to literally to say that we're going to have a workforce with everything from a 2-year degree to PhDs and everything between. And so here, this certainty is a part of removing, we have uncertainty. I'm going to keep investing in these, keep making sure that we're the #1 transportation system completely, top to bottom. But we have to remove this. It's not just a mechanical thing, and it's the will and the ability to get it done. Also shows them that rather than running away from our challenges, a company wants to know that a city is willing to confront them and deal with them.
So I guess my question goes to the question: how much uncertainty will remain in terms of our city's finances after this budget? So, for instance, the first question I had was, can you lock in 4 years of property tax increases for police and fire now? Second question is, there must be other property tax increases down the road that are not discussed today that are going to come along when you have to make the second and third and fourth payment for, let's say, municipal laborers, or you have to make school payments. In other words, the uncertainty is going to remain, and the city council is still going to have to take some really tough votes in subsequent years.
Let me hold on one second. One is, I slightly disagree in this sense. I didn't say I was going to give I can't do all absolute certainty, but well, here's what I can. There's never going to be there's not any certainty about the fact that we're going to deal with the structural deficit once and for all. It's down 2/3 and we can finish the job. We're going to give them absolute certainty that all the other things that were overhanging on the budget, scoop and toss, borrowing for operating costs, those are going to be done. We've given them certainty in the last 4 years. We don't raid the rainy day fund. We don't sell assets to meet obligations, and we don't do one-time revenue sources. So you can't even give me absolute certainty what's going to be in the paper on Friday. What I can give you is I just removed a big piece as it relates to the structural deficit and the operating budget, and we have a record of 4 years to prove we're willing to do it. And on the big issues of the pensions, as release of police and fire, which are a big piece, we've shown you that we're willing to step up and meet our obligation, because the cuts to do it are the wrong way to go, meaning cuts in police, cuts in fire, cuts in basic neighborhood services. And this budget escrows what we've done with labor and municipal. So we're actually putting money away to meet our responsibility as consistent with the negotiations with the 28 unions.
You've already offered, though, to raise property taxes another $170 for the teachers. If there's a part of a grand bargain where the state picks up the pension payment and the teachers take their 70% pay cut through the pension pickup.
I've been honest.
Right.
That's like a short supply sometimes. I've been upfront. And what I mean by that is, let me say, teachers will the biggest financial. Well, let me back up. The biggest I'll say this, and then I want to back up. The biggest challenge for financial challenge or fiscal challenge for schools is in and around pensions. They make the lion's share of the billion. I've been upfront. The state has to eliminate the inequity where they treat Schaumburg and Naperville and those students better than they treat the city of Chicago students, which have been historic. No other city has to pay their teachers' pensions but the city of Chicago. Every other city that passes a school budget does it with the assumption the state will pay their teachers' pensions, even when the taxpayers of Chicago don't have a say in the negotiations. Second, so the state has to be a part of it. I've been upfront that if you're going to play a role, we'll play a role. But teachers have to also play a role. It's their pension. And that's to ensure that we don't have to make further cuts that affect the kids in the classroom.
But after
and
hitting
so,
the property tax so hard on this for the city budget,
I agree.
how you then go back to the same alderman and say, please raise them another $170.
First of all, as you probably saw today, and I'll just say one part is, and that's why I've been clear that aldermen don't have to bear this without everybody else being a partner. That's one. Two, I know you were at the speech, Fran, and when I mentioned about us stepping up to help our kids get modern classrooms in schools, the aldermen not only applauded but stood up for it. I would argue, since you've covered city council, do you remember them ever standing up for the fact that we were going to raise property taxes? They did for the first time, because they actually acknowledge that we have a responsibility. I don't go into it lightly, but I've been clear up front. The state, the teachers, and us need to be a partner. I was up front with a way to resolve it fairly, where everybody was part of the solution and nobody bared the responsibility by themselves.
But you talked in the campaign that you warned about property taxes exploding if there wasn't certain things that happened. You talked about going to property taxes as a last resort. You talked about a casino, you talked about a service tax, and here you're relying so heavily on property taxes and also warning that there might be another one for schools. I mean, why not? What happened to the casino? What happened to the service tax?
Well, first of all,
the other alternatives.
Well, you skipped something in your explanation, if I may. For 4 years, I said no to property taxes until we did the tough work. And as it relates to how we're doing things, the property tax is only for police and fire pensions while we do our other work. And it was actually, I think it was sitting in Alex's chair, it was here at this table during the campaign where it could have been clearer that the operating budget was going to be one thing, how we dealt with pensions was another as it related to that. And so I'm being actually consistent with what I pledged in the campaign. I didn't go right there 4 years ago. I fought very hard to not do it for 4 years. But let me also then, as it relates to police and fire, be clear. This is an inherited problem built up for decades. The state permitted the city to make minimal payments over the years. That's a fact. In 2010, the state changed the rules of the game where the pension liability or cost went from the pension fund all of a sudden then to the city taxpayers. Never existed before. They changed the rules. We're now at the situation, there's two choices. Make all these cuts in basic services of public safety, neighborhood services, or pay a property tax dedicated to police and fire pensions, but in a progressive fashion that makes sure that hardworking families and homeowners with homes of 250,000 or less are not affected.
So, follow up on Fran's question. I think the question is massive property tax increase. And by the way, we've been on board with this editorial page, but the question is...
I've known ever since you've been on board, you've lost 30 pounds in the last 4 months.
But the question is whether or not there might be some alternative revenue sources that perhaps you haven't gone to. Fran mentioned the casino, but the Progressive Caucus sent out a memo today, and they went through a list of what they think is an alternative. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go through them. The first one was a payment in lieu of taxes from nonprofits like universities, which at first I thought maybe it's nothing, so I went on and looked up today. And there are cities that do this. Baltimore, Boston does it a lot, where they go to the big universities. You said we have 17 here, major
15.
universities. And they say, you don't pay any property taxes whatsoever. You should be paying something else. This is the issue that they have in Evanston at Northwestern every year. Is that a plausible alternative or future source of revenue?
Yeah, well, first of all, back to the casino. I mean, we've been working at it. The only time we've ever got out of 2 chambers, we did it. That said, I've had conversations with both the Senate President, the Speaker, the Governor, who are supportive of it. And it's, as I said in the campaign, as I said after the campaign, as a way to shore up. You're never going to be able to do what you need to do just on a casino. Never said that. It would shore up the pension payments. Do you want to say something about the universities, and then I'll go in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to say that, yes, there are a couple of examples out there. Boston is slightly differently situated than us. Much of their tax base is actually wrapped up in universities. They had a long, very long, difficult discussion with those universities about making some kind of contribution. And of course, in the case of Evanston, that hasn't been particularly successful, has it? I think from, our perspective is that
That's as nasty as Alex ever gets, right there. We just saw it, except for when she's talking to me. Go ahead, Carole, and then I want to say something.
I was going to say that, and it also would require a longer period of time to negotiate and put into place. And as Alex points out, it would be something that we would have to revisit with those institutions on a pretty regular basis. So it's something that we saw from the Progressive Caucus, something we said we would do more research on, but it was not something that we could use. As the mayor mentioned, we need certainty to stabilize our financial situation, and that wouldn't provide it.
It's not like we've actually taken a pass also on the university, so let me be really clear about something. We have a bill that's due today because the game got changed in 2010. We're paying today's bill, and I'm rejecting the cuts of police, fire, and neighborhood services, and we're doing it in a progressive way. Every university has to play a role in the city, and some play very extensive. UIC just stood up with our Chicago Star Scholars as it relates to their education. They're coming back with some ideas they want to do on high schools. Loyola, the largest international, has a very significant IB program for teachers, training teachers and principals. They are the partner with said high school. DePaul works with Lakeview, the 9th to 14th grade, as it relates to our STEM education. U of C has done things on the Metra station when we did some other things with them, and then have done other type of investments. So everybody in the university system is not just the university. They make major. Northeastern does it with Amazon. I mean, I don't want to go there. St. Xavier does it with Morgan Park on their IB program. So IIT does it with Von Steuben as it relates to the STEM education and free summer school for the kids there. So every university's been called upon to get outside of their 4 walls and into our city. And the good news is they have been incredibly generous with their educational time and their resources to be a full resident of the city of Chicago. Our bill is due today. While there's some merits and some challenges to the idea, it won't address what we need today or solve it. That's why we did it in a progressive fashion.
All these alternatives are just things that would incrementally improve the situation. They wouldn't replace the property tax. But the second one would be that, and I thought I'd never heard this one, a stormwater stress tax on big box stores. And I guess that's because they cover so much territory. A lot of their water goes into it. Is that something that has been discussed seriously?
It's something We provided some information to the Progressive Caucus on it. You know, it's one of these ideas that trying to structure it there is not easy. The other thing is they're pulling an example that is particularly prevalent in suburbs or other communities that have, you know, the large Walmart or other big box store that's got the massive parking lot. That's not what we're like in the city, right? We're much denser. We don't have that kind of impact from parking lots in the same way that they do. I mean, I think there's some merit from an environmental perspective to take a look at that and to think about, particularly given what's been happening with rain levels and flooding levels and things like that just nationally, some value to look at it, but it's really not, I think, in our evaluation of it, something that's about generating revenue.
Can I say one thing on process and then on point? First, we've had, and Alderman Arena has spoken to this, we've had 3 or 4 meetings with the Progressive Caucus for their ideas over the last 4 months. And I think they've been noted that the process, their ideas have been solicited, so these aren't new to us. Yeah. We've actually had an iterative process. Number 2, I would like to say, since the city now has the largest green technology fund as it relates to stormwater and other investments, this is directionally, as I said to this John Arena specifically, who came up with or talked about this idea. Here are the challenges. Really, the city is not a suburb. Our density is different. That said, we now have, I think it's $45 million in the green fund as it relates to dealing with water runoff, residential water runoff, and we have a way to fund it. That said, I'm open to explore ideas, but again, that's for a green investment, not to solve a pension.
What about Burke's idea about the congestion fee? He brought it up in 2006. He's bringing it up again. Is that something you're open to, or is that just too difficult to implement?
I thought we explained that Sunday, but I will just again say we've explored it. In my conversations with the chairman, I said that we looked at what London did, we looked at what New York tried to do but was rejected, at least by Albany. I said that I would put together a task force with him, playing a significant role in it, to study how it would work, how you would implement it, given that we don't have control. That's a state issue. What are the upsides to it? What are the downsides? And then also what would it generate? And so we have done some homework on it. And I would say directionally, let me say this on both of these ideas. I said today in the speech, while this is a budget, our ability to find savings and reforms doesn't end. While I've asked people for ideas for the budget, I'll always solicit their ideas. And so we're going to study this particular idea, post the budget in the same way as it relates to green technology or green investment in infrastructure. I'm open to ideas.
But I mean, aren't you worried? Daley rejected that idea, saying that it would discourage people from coming downtown for dinner.
We're not doing anything. We're not doing anything yet. We're studying it.
I understand you study, but is it something that you're really open to?
You would like me to
just studying it? You know, you
No,
can study it to death if you want to.
That's true. Well, how about this? We'll take off the table. I won't study it to death. But I think the way to look at it is, I'm open to looking at it, and part of the questions you have to ask is, how does it operate? I mean, I'm doing this by memory, so correct me. I think London spends about 40% of the money they generate in just the operation. So what does it really generate? If it generates X on revenue but costs you X on jobs and economic development, how do you weigh those things? And if we could do it, how would it operate? And so I'm not going to study it to death. He doesn't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time. We're going to study it. I'm going to have an open mind to it, but I weigh equities all the way across. Is it feasible? That's like equity 1. If it's feasible, how do you set it up? How much goes into operating the system and how much goes into generating revenue? Does it have a net negative effect in the sense of economic growth and job creation? So there's a lot of questions, and so that's why we're going to study it.
Can you talk about the Uber and the cab thing? The cabs are very upset. They say 15% is hardly a good exchange for opening up O'Hare, Midway, McCormick Place. That's their last bastion. That's the last place where they have exclusivity.
Well, let me start a little back and then work right into that, because there's a context and there's a history. When I first became mayor, I think it was in 2012 we did it, or maybe 2012, because we announced it right actually, right here or right over there at Merchandise Mart. There hadn't been a reform to the taxi industry in 20 years. There haven't been any changes at all. Ever since that time, more taxis are wheelchair accessible. A lot more are hybrid. The experience by the customer in the taxi is a lot better. Now, taxi drivers have been asking for a fare increase for themselves for about a decade. In that time also, Uber and Lyft and the rideshare industry has risen. We put, the first city to put overarching architectural regulations over the industry that had never existed before. The changes we're making here give them the taxi drivers anywhere from $4,000 or $5,000 up to $10,000 in income, depending how much they work. And we put a surge charge as it relates to the rideshare industry. The taxi drivers themselves get anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. The rideshare industry gets access to things walled off, meaning airport marketplace, and the ability to meet our operating budget and make the reforms necessary. But in our operating budget, this rising industry plus the other industry that's reformed plays a role. I see a win-win situation. I would separate Uber, Lyft, taxi drivers from the taxi industry. And I think I actually am making a change that the taxi drivers have wanted for a long time.
But O'Hare and Midway and McCormick Place, that's their last place. And they say that that is a huge thing to give
I suppose
away.
no, I'm not giving it to them. I'm not giving it to Uber and Lyft. I'm making sure that the customers of the city of Chicago and its visitors have choice. The taxi drivers are getting a pay increase up to $10,000. Things that Lyft and the riders for Uber and Lyft wanted, they get, but they have to pay a bigger share on taxes that they've never paid. And our customers, both in the city and visitors to the city, now have choice that they never had before. I consider that a win-win across the system.
But will
Well,
the
the cab
taxi
drivers
industry
would say that
survive
death
it?
now, though.
They get a $10,000, up to $10,000 pay increase, exactly what they've been asking for years.
They say the taxi industry won't survive, that it's
Well,
already
you know,
on its knees.
I'm very sensitive to, I want to hear what everybody has to say. I would just say, as two cautionary notes, flashing yellow light, that's all I'm going to say, to use a metaphor on the street.
Can I ask
Lost
you
on
about-
all of you. But let me just say, on a serious note, when I introduced the first city to introduce regulatory reform, a regulatory oversight of the rideshare industry, everybody said, oh, you'll be killing the rideshare industry in Chicago. It surged. In 2011, when I introduced an increase in the hotel tax, everybody, when I came here, oh, you're going to kill the hotel industry. We are 8,000 more hotels. Cost per room is up. Our visitors and our convention business hitting records. It is in a mosaic of things that you do that judgments are made. And I would say to you that as other people have questioned certain changes we've made, they have actually prospered, and the city's prospered because our customers, our visitors, our residents, everybody has had more choice and better service.
Can you talk a little bit about the relative virtues of a property tax rebate based on income compared to a homeowner's exemption, which is your preference?
If you guys want to go through
Yeah.
stuff I can go through, but
Sure,
go
I
ahead.
think between Carole and I. You know, I think from our perspective, we started with the idea of a rebate, not of a rebate, of an exemption, that if you're looking at, particularly that low-income homeowner that you want to try to protect them from a property tax increase and to try to make it more progressive, a rebate gives them a discount off their bill right away. They don't have to go cash out of pocket. They don't have to pay the exemption. Sorry, I'm going to keep confusing this. The exemption gets them, it protects them from the very get-go. A rebate, actually, they've got to go pay the bill. They've got to come in. They've got to apply. They've got to then be reimbursed for the money.
I'm taking responsibility for the city's finances in the sense of giving people not only certainty, but doing and stepping up to our obligation.
But you know how, having been around here, you know how this will play. It'll play the anti-tax crowd is rounder by agreeing to increasing the exemption is, in a sense, setting the table for property tax in Chicago, which he's been against.
No, two things. One is he's for revenue. He's already said he would be for revenue to solve their problem. He said it. If you're raising your eyebrow, I can get you the quotes where he said it, but he has said it. So he's for revenue. Two, everybody gets the homestead exemption. It would most affect our seniors and our hardworking families, so it's consistent with his 2-year property tax freeze. Ours is more permanent.
Has he committed to signing the police and fire pension bill?
I
Has he told you that?
I think that I don't ever reveal private conversations. I haven't operated that way in my prior responsibilities. I won't here. I do think I would say three things in and around what we're doing. One, it's consistent with how he thought police and fire should be treated separate on the state level as related to public safety. Two, the homestead exemption is consistent with his property tax freeze. And three, he's been the largest advocate for local control. I can't think of anything more consistent of the fact that police, fire, and the city actually work something out. Four, it got 22 Republican votes in the House. Five, it has a shorter arc than the suburban police and fire arc. So on every level, this is either consistent with what he laid out and achieves the objectives of what we have to do to make sure our finances are in order.
I take it your friendship is still very much intact.
Well, I was going to say something. I'm not going to say it. I just say, I think we both worked very hard at separating our friendship from our job. And what I mean by is I have to represent the people of Chicago, and I would never let his friendship get in the way of that.
How often would you say you guys talk a week?
It's not. It's let me say this. Our administrations talk on a very regular basis.
Do you go to
Do you
the
talk
lunch with them?
directly to him? You don't have to tell me what you say, but you talk directly.
Well, I've had a more intimate conversation with you about my book reading list than I did with him. Look, he has to represent the state. I represent the city of Chicago, the economic engine of the state. We have a friendship, a personal relationship that I think serves our ability to be direct and honest with each other well. But I have never been shy about anything in my life, and I'm not shy when I think somebody's not helping the city of Chicago. I've told them, you want to work on workers' comp? I'm ready. Your idea about right to work is worse than half-baked, and I've been upfront about that too. But I'm not putting you in on a conference call when we talk.
Can you talk about what you'll do if the municipal and labor deal is overturned, as it appears it will be? Because the Supreme Court's been very consistent on this point.
I'm not going to give, let me say this. I'm not.
Your turn.
You want me to go in here? I apologize. Because it's the first time you're about to say anything, okay? Okay, let me just go here. Let me do it this way. Police and fire in 2010, the law changed at the state. They took it from a pension fund obligation to a city obligation. That is not true about labor and municipal. Now, all four were in bad shape for a host of reasons, both by the city and the state. We inherited those problems. I believe I negotiated a good deal all around. And I believe, as it relates to the Constitution, which is the thrust of your question, Fran, since in both labor and municipal, the city never had an obligation or stepping up to something that's never existed by the city, which is an obligation and a guarantee to fund. And they agreed to it, which is also different from the state, which is how they did theirs. That said, hold on, no, I just want to finish this one last thought. As I mentioned in the speech, we have escrowed the money consistent with that agreement.
I know, but
So-
I'm asking
so-
you.
I
if
know
it's
what you're
over-
asking,
If it's
and I've
overturned,
I'm
where
not
will
go-
you turn for the money?
Before you go to the court, you think the idea I would actually send them a signal that I thought about what they would do? No, I argue on the merits of what we have, and I would never do that.
You
It
want
sounds
Fran,
like you're also
actually-
saying that the Supreme
yeah,
Court
I was
does
saying-
not.
A point of clarification, if the Senate Bill 1922 is overturned, the payment, the contribution requirement of the city actually goes down.
Goes
So it's
down
actually a
initially,
budget.
right, but over time, it's a monster.
budget positive.
But
And
you're-
what would you do then for the money?
I'm not, Fran, because I'm not. There's something in front of the court, and I think we've done exactly what the court has asked. That's consistent with the constitutional parameters of a guarantee.
It sounds like you're
That
also
never
saying
existed before.
that the court doesn't see it your way, that the city has no obligation to make those payments. Is that something you would consider, simply walking away from them?
I'll let Carole and Alex answer, but I think the law is the law, and Mike, there's a law is the law, and I'm also clear that I believe in people's retirement security. They have to be a partner in solving this problem.
I think the mayor just said what we
It's the first time those two has ever said that what I said counts. I really want to thank you for that.
But I mean, the police and fire are not a partner, you didn't cut a deal with them
No,
because
that's
of
not-
this other,
The state changed
decision.
the state changed the rule in 2010.
But I mean, you were asking police and fire to meet you halfway, but when the Supreme Court came down with their decision, you backed off of that.
You're now going to the court. I know you know this, Fran, but you're talking about the court's decision about the state law, not about labor and municipal. Number two, unlike labor and municipal, the state in 2010 changed the rules of the game on police and fire and made the obligation all of a sudden to cities, which it had never existed before, and they did it when they were doing the Tier 2 employee changes.
And also, Fran, the Senate Bill 777
Hi, Mary.
was
Thanks for
an
coming.
agreed upon
Yeah.
payment that was made with
the unions.
police and fire.
No,
So,
with-
so
Right,
it
I
is
know.
true
I know,
that
but they're not contributing more, they're not, retiring earlier.
we're
or
adhering to the
whatever.
law, but it was an agreed upon.
I understand.
Yeah.
So he did work with the unions on
So one thing that surprised me a lot about the whole budget conversation was the garbage collection and that uproar that seemed to have, over garbage collection. It seemed to me $9.20 didn't seem like a lot of money. And I was reading a story this morning, Fran's story, about that.
Don't do it. It's really good for your health if you don't.
Well, I was reading the story, and what interests me is that the idea that if people don't pay, you're still going to get your garbage picked up. Now, that sounds like a little thing, but it seems to me it's sending a message that you're really not serious about garbage collection. Because if you can still have the service and you don't pay, what's the thinking behind that? I
Well,
don't get it.
I was just gonna, it was a public health and sanitation issue. So for quality of life, we didn't want to imply that if people didn't pay the garbage fee, that we weren't gonna continue to pick up the garbage. The other plan is that the garbage fee would be attached to the water bills. And so enforcement would be done around kind of water and the water bills, as opposed to not picking up garbage, because we don't want to negatively impact people's quality of life.
So
And having garbage pile up.
But actually, I was gonna say one thing, but that's very consistent with actually the way a lot of communities do their fee and their collection related to
Right.
garbage. So, I mean, garbage fee's not a new thing, it just happens to be new for, about half of the residents of the city of Chicago. Lots of folks in the city already pay for private garbage collection. When you look at suburban communities and communities outside of the city, the way they handle it is they typically stick it on a utility bill, so like the water bill. They do their enforcement through their normal enforcement mechanisms to try to get people to pay.
So what would be Chicago's normal enforcement mechanism?
So in this case, it'd probably be our
They'd
water
have to
bill.
read Fran's story every day. No.
You cut off
Cut
the
off the
water?
water.
What do you do with the? with
Can
the-
I back up a little? No, we're gonna get right here, but here's the thing. Let me go, there's a couple pieces to this, okay? One is, when I became mayor, we had the most expensive garbage, so we put a grid system in place. Second, we're doing another grid, so we're 60 trucks fewer than we were 4 years ago. It's not like we're producing more garbage or we're, ever. So we're 20% less. Third, because of labor agreements and break-in rates. Let me give you laborers. We saved $30 million over the next last 4 years, or 5 years, because of the different contract we negotiated. So we're like 50 some odd $1 million cheaper than we were just in 2011. We made the aldermen make changes. They no longer do it on a ward map. We do it on a grid efficiently model. Haven't missed a beat of service. And the gentlemen and the folks that work on the trucks are cheaper from a price standpoint. Now, second, 50% of the city pays up to $16. Berwyn pays 25. Alana, 25. Same size cans, 96 pounds. Seattle, up to $100. So, actually, I think, I'm not saying that it is a new fee, but it's reflective of the cost of running the city.
Right.
I would also argue there are other cities have it like on a utility bill, and there's other ways to enforce it. We are adding road abatement crews to the budget. We're not going to affect public health. On the other hand, there's a whole way to enforce it to make sure that people will comply rather than not comply, even while garbage is getting picked up from other licenses, other types of informants, that you can make it consistent that people across the city do it. If Atlanta does it, Seattle does it, Berwyn does it, Evanston does it. We can make this work.
Right, but if I don't pay that utility in full, eventually they're gonna cut off my water.
There's other things that can happen as it relates to other licenses and fees before we get to water. So we're going to make sure people participate in an equitable way.
Do you understand the anger about this? I mean, it sort of really sticks in people's craw, I don't know why. Yes.
You know, it's a funny question, Fran, coming from you, but
What?
that's
That's a
it.
great question. It's like-
No, I'm not saying it's not a good-
$100 year.
$9.50 a month, and yet they're
I just-
really angry about it.
No, well, here, let's separate a couple things. I fully appreciate if you're introducing a new fee, because some people think this is a service that's kind of baked in. We've made a series of reforms, as I just identified, almost $55 million of them, to make garbage, not change the service, but also make it more cost efficient and smarter. And then we added a new service, which is recycling. And so I can understand when you're introducing something new, but I do think we're bringing fairness across the city, since half the city already pays a rate. Other cities do it, and it's reflective of the cost of doing the business. And I didn't go to taxpayers first or homeowners first. I did a whole series of reforms first to get the cost down.
But you didn't shrink the crews, the size, the 3 men on a truck, which is another thing that kind of sticks in people's craw.
Well-
We don't actually have 3 men on every truck,
And
right?
not in every one, but a lot.
We have
of
it,
them.
no,
A
but
lot.
that's an operational issue. I mean, I guess I have to kind of disagree with that a little bit, which is, we do have some alleys that need 3 guys in the back of a truck, right? There are alleys that have a lot of garbage in them. There are some of them that are particularly dense. You know, one of the things that is part of this grid realignment that the mayor was mentioning has been this idea of thinking through how many guys you need in the back of the truck. Do you need 3? Do you need 2? Do you need 1? That's going to vary very much by community, by, you know, neighborhood. And one of the things that Streets and Sand has done is really start to right-size those crews for the level of work that's necessary.
Lois, you make it sound like it's
Alex.
a policy
Alex.
decision
Alex.
based on how many people,
Hold
excuse me.
on, Alex.
But isn't it really a union contract issue? Where
No,
you,
no,
the contract
Teamster
requires
driving
it?
the
No,
truck
first of all,
and-
we have alleys.
and back.
Some of those are going to be 3. The other thing is there's about 44 routes where you could actually modernize the system to go with an electronic arm. And so that is an opportunity. That's 44 routes out of all, okay? So we're constantly looking at savings. Don't assume this is the end of the way of looking at efficiencies. But we are 20 trucks fewer, rather 20%, 60 trucks fewer than we were in 2011. And our cost per person on the trucks, on the back of the truck, is about $30 million over, it's almost $6 million a year cheaper. Now, we've looked at other changes that we can make, and we're not done making them.
So that electronic arm, that's a 1-man crew, that's a 1 guy
There's
driving the
40,
truck.
it's not an answer for the city. There's 44 routes out
Will
of
you
the.
try it in the 44?
We're going to be continue. What part of exploring is that I'm going to keep looking at things as we are the congestion fee. We keep looking at different things. We're not done.
Where are those 44?
They're all throughout the city.
There's only so much my memory can handle,
Yeah,
but there's
Fran,
44 is what I know.
They're curbside, they'd have to be for curbside collection. Our alleys aren't big
And
enough.
so you're going to try that as a pilot?
We're going to look at it. I mean, the point of the matter is just going back to this, is that, again, with same thing with crew size, with the grid realignment, with all the work that's been done, is we've got a big city with lots of different neighborhoods, with lots of different just geographic structure and lots of different, you know, garbage collection volumes. And so we're going to look at it depending on what's appropriate for the neighborhood.
I do want to say, go ahead.
You know, this could very well be your second and last term. So what do you say to aldermen?
You and Fran seem to always
By-
predict what the
by-
next
by
4 years look like
choice.
for my life, my God.
By choice. So, by choice. So what do you say to aldermen? Say, hey, you know, Rahm, it's fine for you, but I need this job. I can't, this is a much tougher vote for me than it is for you.
I say to them, I said, you're a better person than an alderman. I'm trying to, no. Here's what I say, first of all. You didn't run, there's a couple things. One is what I said at the end. You could be known as an alderman who, in time for public life, I believe you ran to do public service, that you will muster the energy and the commitment to solving our problems and stand up to them rather than stand aside. I really do think you'll have to, you'll look inside and realize you don't want to be one of the people that was allowed a problem to get worse rather than actually address the problem. And even like by example of that, well, I happen to think the homestead exemption is better than the rebate. I appreciate the fact that people are putting time and energy into an idea of how to address this thing. I also believe as somebody who's run for 7 elections, never lost, as somebody who's played a role in re-elections for presidents who have a record, as also as chair of the party apparatus when we took back the House, you don't lose your election for a vote. You lose it on how you represent your constituents and serve them. And I'm going to make sure that if you are willing to stand for the future of the city of Chicago and do the responsible things, that you will be a good alderman.
Are you going to support these people financially, whether you run
I'm going to say, you take me out of the equation because you seem to conclude.
You're such a powerhouse.
Oh, yeah,
but you have so much fundraising ability. You could help them if you.
I'm going to make sure that they're going to be a good alderman in representing their constituents and ability to meet their constituents' needs. And I also think, if you want to, it is early. There's 4 years. You have a lot of things that you can do in your ward to be a great alderman. Now I'm going to help you.
But will you help them financially, even if you're running or not? Will you be? Will
I
you
think.
be a
Let me say.
fundraiser for
Let me
the
just say
people who
this.
stand with
Let
you
me
now?
say this. You know my record. I stand with my friends, and I'm always going to stand with
What
my
are the odds
friends.
you will run again?
First of all, let
You
me
just got reelected.
I appreciate that. Let me say this. I didn't put a budget together based on my reelection. I put the budget together based on the future of the city of Chicago. I made pledges and commitments in the campaign, and I'm addressing them completely. I think I've never shown that I'll never waver. If you were doing my politics, there are things you would have done in my first term you wouldn't have done, but I thought it was right for the city. And the best way to do your politics is to always do your policy right. Okay? And so I'll make a decision when it's the right time to make a decision, but I will not put my political future ahead of the future of the city of Chicago. Don't worry about my reelection. Worry about the future of the city of Chicago and whether we're making the right decisions for them in the fairest, most equitable way. When it comes to my election, I promise I'll call you. This is not the time you have to worry about it.
The 311 system, why are you privatizing it, and how many jobs are at stake there, and what's the advantage?
I think you can go through certain things. I know what I want to say. Or you both could go.
So with respect to 311, to answer your first question, Fran, there's about 70 people who provide 311 services. What we're talking about is going out for an RFP to solicit proposals on how we might restructure it. There are lots of privatized call centers in local government, including some 311 systems. I mean, New York City uses actually a private company to do their peak and after-hours call volume. We've got a very old system where we need to invest. We need to invest in, new technology. We need to invest in new ways for people to communicate with us, to generate not only information that we need, but also to generate requests and service requests. And so we want to see what the options are that are available to us.
Let me, we look at everything. We've done different call centers as it related to the water system. And I said that nothing was walled off from reform. I believe privatizing it or bringing in other workers would be the right thing to do, but more importantly, over the next 3 years, there's about $40 to $50 million in capital investment you have to make to modernize it. And I think doing it with a private operator is a better way to do it than we don't have that type of resources, so I'm being upfront about it. So it's not about the $1 million today or the $1 million tomorrow, but it is about the $40 to $50 million over the next 3 years we don't have, but we're going to need if we're going to have a 21st century 311 system. Given Chicago inaugurated the 311 system, I want to keep it on the cutting edge, and a private operator can actually help us do that. So, can I say one thing? Can I apologize this? I want to go back to one other thing relevant, I think, as you said, to re-election or whatever. I was clear when I spoke today that I understand it's a tough vote. I get that. I've been in politics. I actually think part of politics, and I know sometimes people dismiss politics, you have to marry up policy and politics. That's why I'm going to say I'm going to be clear about helping people who want to help the city's future. But that said, I also don't want to be, and I don't think any of the people in that room, regardless of whether they agree or disagree with me, they didn't run for office to count their time. Because the public in the city of Chicago, like other cities, see Springfield, see Washington, and think the only thing people do in there is worrying about re-election. And nothing's getting done. Because their election and their re-election is paramount. I think what's paramount in public service to this great city, to the people that have entrusted me with a second term, is I do what's right. And I happen to think even when it's hard and it's right, it's the right politics. Because this vote will stand the test of time of getting the city's finances once and for all in order.
You know, this whole kind of logic kind of serves the cause of term limits. A lot of people say what's going on here, what you're arguing is exactly why people need term limits, so they don't have to make those difficult self-serving.
Well, I got it. That said, I'm against term limits, always have been. That's what elections are. Elections are term limits. They're built into the system.
Superintendent McCarthy, he's been superintendent now longer than most folks who've held that job. You anticipate he'll be with you through the remainder of your term here?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What he's done right, well, what you think he could do better?
Well, yeah, look, that's a longer conversation, but let me say, there's only not about just numbers, but I want to look at it. Under his tenure, and there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, too much of the public safety is only related about police. I happen to think, well, we're giving our kids through after-school summer jobs great opportunities. It is also about public safety. Okay? So that said, I also think a rising graduation rate is about public safety. The one thing that guarantees that kids don't go into a life of crime is the most guaranteed is high school graduation. One thing common in jails and prisons across the country, across the state, dropout. So there's a lot that goes into it, so as does economics. First and foremost, the city over the last 4.5 years has seen a 33 to 34% drop in crime. When you take burglaries, armed robberies, all the facts, all those numbers based on FBI data, 33 to 34%. So the beat integrity strategy, where accountability exists to the commander and the beat officers and the community policing we've implemented, has actually worked at that level. And you can look at 2011 on all these data, where we are today, you can see the results. And I want you to get them. It's I think in my view, an untold story at least of the success of that kind of level of public safety and engagement with the community on community policing. Operation Impact Zone has had an impact on gun violence. There are things as it relates to both poverty, access to guns, and a lack of a value system and a penalty system in the criminal justice system that has Chicago, when it comes to gun violence, stand up. And I don't believe we should stand for it. Now, our history as a city, the concentration of poverty, the free and access to guns, whether that's in the county, the state, Indiana, Wisconsin, our gangs, I think a penalty structure that doesn't have a consequence related to repeat gun offenders. All of that, including the breakdown of the family, have an impact. That's beyond the police department and that's beyond after school and summer jobs. And so I think at a lot of levels, Gary and the police leadership, all the way down to our most recent recruits, are doing an effective job. That doesn't mean they're doing what they need to do. There's always ways to improve it. As I just announced in my budget, 319 officer change. But I really think, if you looked at it in a comprehensive fashion, it is not just about how many police you have. What are they doing? What are you doing in after-school summer jobs, which is why I'm proud, even while Washington and Springfield is basically cut and run from our kids, we stepped up in a dramatic way while we're making reforms to our budget. We have 100% increase in after-school funding in a 4 years in a row, 5 years in a row budget cutting exercise. Okay, so that said, but there's economic issues, there's family issues, there's cultural issues, and there's gun issues. So on gun violence, we need to make wholesale changes. As it relates to other elements of the public safety, there has been improvements, and it's not like you get to declare victory at 33.5% decline. You have more work to do.
Can you talk about the Kochman cops? Where is the penalty before all these guys retire and they escape all punishment?
No. You know this is under IG
how long does it take? I mean.
Well, the last person you want to, would you like me to interfere in an IG investigation? That would be a story that would fill up the paper.
Editorial.
I bet you would like the print. I bet you. I will abstain
Have you
from that
asked what's-
recommendation coming from the editorial
Well,
page.
have
That I
you
would.
asked
No.
What's taking so long?
I'm not, no, I will not participate or in any way, if I call the IG, it would be inappropriate. I'm not going to do it. I don't care what if that's the recommendation of this room, it's summarily rejected by the mayor, okay? When I got to office, and let me get back up, the first one is I've expressed to Ms. Kochman and the family the apology on behalf of the city. She lost a son. We have addressed the issue also from the city in a comprehensive fashion. Because it doesn't fall under IPRA, it was the Independent Police Review Board. It was then sent to the IG. There's a court case, as you know, that just got resolved. The IG is investigating. My only statement is to Ms. Kochman and the family, I am not calling the IG. I'm not doing it.
So, you know, without talking about the IG, without talking about.
Well, I'm sorry, the question was to
without
talk
talking
about the IG.
specific officers and disciplinary action, the kind of things you wrote about today. You know, I've never actually heard you talk about, in general, about the culture of the police department that was reflected in that whole Kochman story and what you've done to change it over the years.
Well, you know, I could stay here quite a long time, but I have a thing at the back end called Yom Kippur. So, and I have to be sensitive to some other publications, but let me be. One, let me say it this way. I brought in new leadership. Our police department as a whole, like other parts of the city, were reflective of the overall political culture, where who you knew sometimes was more important than what you knew. I think we created a culture of accountability based on results and professionalism. And what I mean by that is we had a commander in the 20th district, first time an African American ever been on the north side. It wasn't based on the fact that he was anything but a good cop. In the same way that Leo took over the 7th district in Englewood, and a lot of people complained when I did that, thought it would only be one type of, you know. Prior to there, it used to be Mr. Crothers, who was associated with an alderman. And Leo did such a good job that when he was going to move on, the very people that used to complain about him wanted him to stay. So I think that overall the culture of the police department, while I'm not done, has been professionalized, and advancement in career has been professionalized, and the results of fighting crime and coming up with innovative strategies is rewarded rather than not.
And
So
so a
bringing
Kochman
in
thing
somebody like McCarthy from New York is very much consciously.
I'm not saying,
I'm wondering if, you know, you just described the culture of the police department where who you knew.
can I just
was
pass
maybe-
my budget?
I think, and I think this is really important. So,
I bet you
know, we
do.
wrote when you brought in McCarthy for all these good reasons, but I have a feeling that back of your mind was the Kochman story. You need to get somebody
No.
complete from the outside.
no, I wouldn't say, he is a, well, remember who he replaced. There was a difference between a former FBI officer
Right.
versus a police officer. So we do have a person who's a police officer and worked his way up the ranks and comes from a culture of police officers. Some people didn't think I was a resident of the city of Chicago either, even though I represented a congressional district.
Right.
I do think it's important to be reflective and respectful of our culture as a city, but also know where its weaknesses were. And we had a system throughout the government, which is who you knew was more valuable than what you knew, which is why I'm proud under my tenure. The federal oversight of our hiring has ended because they actually think not just police department, but every aspect has been professionalized. Hold on, Frank. That not only the city of Chicago, all sister agencies, the court agreed. Not only the city of Chicago, and not only all sister agencies, the city council agreed to the decree as it related to following the professionalization as responsible to and responsive to Shackman. And so I would say to you, when you look across, not just the police, I have And part of the hardest thing, and I'll give you one anecdote, and then I really do need to end here at this point. Part of the hardest thing I have done is not taking garbage collection away from the aldermen, or I didn't mean take it away from them, but I thought there was a better way to do it, and the savings, and then get a new benefit called recycling, etc. Was changing the culture where you valued your service and the results of your service over your political heritage, so to say. And what I mean by that is, you know, one of the things we do now is if there's a neighborhood service, tree trimming, you know, lights or whatever you're doing to service, we actually send an email back if it was sent by email, send a letter back, etc. Hope you're happy with the service. If there's anything else we could do, let us know.
Where's that happening?
It's happening at Department of Streets and Sanitation, okay? And also through 311.
Okay.
So, well, give me your request if it hasn't been answered.
Got plenty of them.
Okay. Wait, are they answered, first of
No,
all?
honestly, no. And,
Okay.
and this is a
Okay.
neighborhood, this is a
Ma-
neighborhood
Mary,
where
let me
there's
just finish.
high crime,
Okay, Mary, can I just finish?
lights are out. I'm just saying.
I got it, Mary. Can I just finish one point?
Sure can.
Thanks. Appreciate that. That getting people to make that change, and they would ask why we were doing that. I said, because you're in the business of servicing. Now, I've gotten other responses than the one I just got from Mary. If you're not getting your responses to basic service calls, I want them. Give them to me. Okay, but I do know this. When I got here, we now have graffiti within 5 days, and it's down from 13,000 back up to 186 as of last week. So I'm just telling you, we are not only doing it, but also then responding to the constituents, because that cultural change, if I can get back on track here, is the biggest response I'm trying to get. And that's throughout the city. And that's probably one of the biggest battles I've had as mayor, is to get that concept across, that what you know and how you do your job is more valuable than who you know and how you got it.
So you're confident that it's
One thing I
public?
want to ask you, how about Hillary? What do you think? Vice there?
Hillary's going to be our nominee.
When does she come in?
I don't know. Look, I've got to be honest. I've been doing my budget. I got to be honest. I don't know. Good to hear from you, Mark. Thanks for coming to dinner with Brad and I.
I got one for you.